Gareth Thomas.
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful to you. The Secretary of State's first major test was to lead the education sector's negotiations with the Treasury in the run-up to the budget. And on any basic evidence, the Secretary of State seems to have failed that test spectacularly. Not only did he fail to secure any meaningful increase in funding for our schools and sixth form colleges, but the complacent attitude of little extra language that the Chancellor of the Exchequer used suggests that he hasn't even been able to convince the Treasury of the scale of the funding needs of the school system in England. And that is profoundly worrying, with comprehensive spending review negotiations happening beginning to happen at the moment. Now, I should at the outset pay credit to the Schools Minister and the sixth form Minister for being willing to receive deputations of Harrow head teachers and indeed the principal of St Dominic's sixth form college. And I'm grateful to both ministers for the way in which they listened to the concerns of professionals in my constituency. Perhaps I should set out some of the information that I have been given to underline the concerns of those head teachers. And in particular, I wanted first, though, to set out the broader London perspective, which reflects some of the concerns of interventions from London colleagues about the financial crisis facing many of our schools in the capital. London Council's analysis of the provisional school funding allocations for 2019-20 that were announced in July, and which appear to follow a similar structure to the 2018-19 formula announcements, show that London schools will receive a lower proportion of funding across 2018-19 and 2019-20 than any other region in the country. 70% of schools in London will receive the minimum, that's 1% increase per pupil, between 2017-18 and 2019-20, compared with just 39% of schools across the rest of England. 15 boroughs in the capital will see more than 90% of their schools receive the floor of a 1% rise per pupil across these 2 years. And in comparison to 2018-19, 21 out of London's 32 boroughs are in the lower half of the schools' block increases. And of the 4 local authorities in the country expected to see a decrease in funding, 2 are London boroughs, including, crucially, from where I sit, my own borough, the London Borough of Harrow. What head teachers are reporting to me in the borough is that there are significant financial pressures on them. Non-teaching pay awards, non-teaching pension rises in pension costs, the impact of the apprenticeship levy, concerns about whether teaching pay awards and incremental pay rises in terms of teachers, whether the funding costs will be provided from central government, all point to an average annual cost implication for primary schools in Harrow of over £70,000 this year in terms of increased costs, and for secondary schools an increase of over £200,000 worth of such costs. At the same time, funding, notably for the pupil premium grant, is reducing for the average school in Harrow. And so schools in Harrow are estimated to be losing, in terms of income, some £80,000 a year, and are profoundly worried as a result, given that on average a teacher costs approximately £50,000 per annum. The analysis by Harrow Council suggests that the funding pressures facing each primary school on average in Harrow amount to the equivalent cost of 1 to 2 primary school teachers, and for secondary school teachers the equivalent of 4 secondary teachers per annum. Now that assumes that on average school budgets are cash flat. In Harrow, some 25%, 14 out of the 54 schools, are currently protected by the minimum funding guarantee, which means in practice these schools will lose 1.5% of their per pupil budget per annum, which could equate to a cash reduction of a further £20,000 to £30,000 per annum. So the Secretary of State might like to hide, and other MPs on the Secretary of State side may like to hide behind the idea that there has been record increases in funding, but on the ground head teachers and governing bodies are reporting substantial financial pressures in Harrow. Local authorities similarly are reporting profound concerns about the rising demand for high-end special needs funding, and it would be good to hear. Okay, very briefly.
Just on special needs, my honourable friend may have seen at the weekend the Observer piece about the crisis across the country in special needs education. My county council just announced a review. We fear the worst. It's already removing special needs allowances from mainstream schools. Would my honourable friend agree that it's time the government launched a review of how special needs are met across the country to inform a coherent policy and provision?
Well, my honourable friend makes a very good point. The key thing is that the extra money needs to be found immediately to be put into particularly high-end, but more generally, special needs provision. Because I know not only Harrow, but many other local authorities, particularly in London and clearly around the rest of the country, are profoundly worried about that. I suspect the Secretary of State knows full well the scale of the pressures facing head teachers in this country. What would be good to hear from the Minister who winds up is what his department is going to do about that in terms of negotiations with the Treasury.